We are.
So I was just mentioning, I don't have to guess where Dan and Joe are from because they just have such a California look going on. Gentlemen, how are you?
We're doing well. It's good to be here.
Just like to point out, Dan's not actually from California. He's a transplant. So we've definitely adopted him, and his look is definitely adopted as well.
Yeah, but now I have a kid from California, so she'll
true.
This
there
is
you
true.
Go. Where are you from, Dan, originally?
Originally from North Carolina, like Charlotte area. Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Yeah, that's not, I was going to say, like, if you're from like Minnesota or something, then, then you're maybe like a total imposter, but you're from, you're from the opposite coast, at least.
I would say when I first got here, I was a bit of an imposter.
Yeah.
Picked up surfing, I think once I could stand up and go down the line, like I started feeling like I kind of belonged.
Yeah. You're one of them. So give me a little background. We're going to talk about Haste Arcade, which I think is probably like the single most interesting, just this beautiful simplicity of your instant leaderboard payout system that you guys created is like the single most interesting use case for micropayments in gaming that I've seen. And it's one of the most like obvious, intuitively, oh, that's cool sort of experiences that you can have. We'll get into all that, but I want to get into kind of your background. How did you get interested in, well, I don't know what came first. If you were interested first in Bitcoin and crypto in general, or if you were just interested in gaming, or if you were interested in micropayments, what was the initial interest that ultimately led to getting started with Haste?
Joe, I'm gonna let you give the background. I feel like we give this one a lot, but it's really a fairly long, windy story. But Joe can typically condense that story a little bit better than I can.
And I think right off the bat, like it wasn't really any of those things that you mentioned. Like we weren't gamers, we weren't like micro transact, like we didn't know anything about that. Bitcoin we'll get to, but Dan and I met playing baseball in the Chicago White Sox systems. We were in the minor leagues, and we were roommates in AA Birmingham. So on the road, you're out there every night, basically you share a room with this guy. And after game typically ends around 10 or 11 o'clock. You have like an hour or so to get your food and then get back to the hotel before curfew. Otherwise, like you get fined or you have to play the next day or whatever. Well, in these little towns that we were bouncing around, like the experience was always the same. Like it's the late night. So really the only places that are open are like bars or pubs or whatever. And in the minor leagues, you're basically changing towns every 3 nights or so. So what we would keep seeing is, oh man, I forgot my credit card at that bar. Or, if the bar was busy, because a lot of these were like college towns, it's like it takes 10 minutes to close out your tab when you're just trying to, get your food, pay and get out of there so you make it back in time for curfew. And it was just through those experiences. I got released in 2014 mid-season. Dan was done after the season. And we just kept in touch. He was from Charlotte. I was from the Los Angeles area. But basically, I remember like one day Dan just called me. He was like, dude, I had this vision in the shower or something like that, where you're just at a busy bar.
The shower is where all the best stuff comes to, right? I'm telling you.
It really is. He's like, man, we were just like at a busy bar and I just like held up my phone and like my order was on my phone and somehow the bartender knew that's what I wanted to order. And so they just handed me my like Coors Lights or Bud Lights or whatever it was in the dream. To me. And then it was like that kind of like sparked this whole like, okay, we had talked about when we were roommates together, wanting to start our own businesses, not really interested in working the corporate, climbing the corporate ladder or working for somebody else. And we shared a pretty similar mindset in terms of like life after baseball and moving past the game and not letting that like define you, because that happens to a lot of guys where, they'll spend their whole lives and then their career ends when they're 24 years old. And it's like, well, shit, what do I do now? Like, where do I go from here? So we were kind of on the same page about what we wanted, after baseball was over. And when this concept came up, it was just like, man, I knew a bar owner out here in Los Angeles. I went to USC and there's like one legendary bar there. It's literally the only bar on campus. It's called the Nino. I happen to know the owner pretty well because he was like a big fan of baseball. And so when I was at USC, I was playing baseball there. And basically went to him with the concept, said, hey, this is what we're thinking of doing. Could we try it at the Nino? And, we're thinking from a customer's perspective, like, oh yeah, like obviously this makes perfect sense. Why wouldn't anybody want to do this? You can order and pay without, all the BS in between. But his response was kind of like a little bit, shocking. It was like, yeah, that sounds great for my customers, but like, what about me? What are you doing for me? And my bar's already full. Like, are you making more money for me? Are you cutting my costs? Whatever. Can you look at my credit card processing rates, for example? And so that was the first time we kind of started digging into like credit card processing, learning what this thing called interchange is. And like, there's a certain base layer that you're going to pay in fees, no matter what, if you're using a credit card. And what that does is it limits, how much you can charge. That's why if you go to a gas station, you spend like less than $5, they tack on an extra 50 cents, at the pump or when you're swiping your card at the checkout. So we didn't really understand how Bitcoin would tie into that at first. But then, just through kind of researching that aspect of, how do we reduce credit card processing rates and whatnot, I remember Dan's like, dude, I found this thing called Bitcoin that like you can send it basically like instantly. And you think about a credit card payment, we think 24 to 48 hours is fast, but is it really? Like, not when you're comparing it to instant. And then on top of that, it's like a fraction of a cent. Again, this is back in 2015 or whenever it was, when you could still send BTC for really low fees. I was like, this could be something cool that we incorporate, at some point. Now, at this time, we're still young and naive, thinking like, this app that we just built is going to go viral. We're going to be on yachts and stuff in like 6 months, and it's going to be great. So we didn't have like a whole bunch of developers working around the clock. It was just us scrapping to get Barpay off the ground. But that's when like it first caught, I'd say, our attention was, really early on in Barpay, thinking about the credit card processing fees, thinking about the transaction, speed and whatnot, and just kept our eye on it. And eventually, we got through 2017 where there were all those ICO scams. We were both, members of BitConnect. I don't know if you were too, but that was one of
that's
that
amazing.
One? Do you remember that one though? Did you hear about it at least?
I remember. I mean, I remember the memes and stuff. I pretty much stayed away from during the ICO stuff. I played around with a little bit with like, I'll buy a little, like just meme coin shit just to like see if I could flip it, make money, but very, very little. I'm kind of like, if I feel like I don't have an advantage over the market, I don't want to get involved. And I'm like, I can't keep up with this shit. I don't have any advantage here, but it was amazing to watch. So many interesting ideas, most of which were just a landing page and nothing real. But
yeah, just a quick little landing page and $60 million later.
Yeah.
I mean,
did you guys did you get burned pretty bad on BitConnect?
Well, we had, I mean, like you said,
we had like a little system.
Yeah.
I like how you both said, well, I mean,
we got burned on some ICOs. BitConnect, we had like 7 layers or whatever it was with the referral going. Like we created 7 different email accounts. We were like at 4 o'clock every afternoon, like, let's see the new rate that comes out. Like, boom, like, how much did we make today? Like, boom, it was really cool.
This is interesting though. This is interesting because there's a pattern here that I think is really common, and it's instructive and just kind of, there's some tragedy in it. There's everything in it, but you get this realization that there's a giant problem. Payments suck. And there's a lot of ways in which payments suck. For some people, it's they interact with the banking system and they're setting up a new company and they're waiting for a wire to come in and it takes like 5 days, just whatever, crazy stuff there. Or in this case, just the casual payments. You're like, why can't I just instantly, conveniently, cheaply do this? So you come across Bitcoin, you get excited about that aspect of it, which essentially everybody was early on. You realize it's a little harder, more complicated than you thought. You're trying to figure out. Then all this other stuff starts happening in crypto, where all these coins with all these different promises. And then there's this huge investment opportunity where you feel like you'd be a fool if you weren't getting involved because people are making a bunch of money. And suddenly you're like thinking about this instead of that original payments issue, right? And then you kind of, I'm guessing, eventually come back to your first love, which made you get introduced to Bitcoin, which is like, okay, maybe the ICO stuff is a little overhyped, but there's still something here around payments and some things that you just can't do with fiat. I've seen that pattern so many times.
That's 100% the pattern. I mean, we were the original sort of thing that brought us in was like, this thing is going to give us a competitive advantage for what we're building with Barpay, right? And through the ICO thing, like through seeing everything that happened there and just sort of that, crazy rise and then ultimate fall of like everything that happened with that, you know, it certainly left a bad taste in our mouth. And by that point, the narrative around BTC had already started to change, right? Like when we first got in, you know, it was BTC was the only thing trading on Coinbase. Like, I mean, we weren't like super early, but we were early enough to see that and to be like sending it back and forth to each other, being like, oh my gosh, this is crazy, right? So it was really through the 2017 thing that happened with all the ICO crap that ultimately led us to just being frustrated, because we're like, man, this is such a promising thing. Like this idea of being able to move little bitty amounts of money across the internet just seemed like this should be, you know, on top of everyone's mindset. If you're building any sort of tech on the internet, like we've just stumbled upon this thing that creates all these new opportunities and business models. And like, I mean, that's one of the things that I still struggle with today is like trying to stay focused on what the task that we have at hand. Yeah. When there are all these other ideas that keep popping up for things that you can do with little payments. Yep. And so it was really out of that frustration. I think Joe, you did a good job of covering sort of like the lead up, except for you left out the part where we lived on the RV and then the couch.
Well, okay. So I was going to ask, I mean, I got so many things we could cover, because I'm so fascinated by people who play sports in the like just below pro level, that minor league, that's like such a grind. It's such there's something I think is so fascinating about that. There's something that I'm super attracted to about it, but it's like an interesting, and then how do you, when you come out of that and decide you're hanging it up and you're done with that, like that can be a really hard identity crisis transition. It's like, you've always been an athlete. That's been your thing. Well, now that's not there as a career option. What's next? I'm guessing, Dan, you're a power hitter. You look like you could smash some balls out of the park. I don't know.
It's funny, if they wouldn't have tried to change who I was as a player, that may have been the case. But I was a middle infielder, and once I got to pro ball, they were like, "Oh, you're not going to be the guy that hits home runs. You're going to be like, you know, get him over type guy on second, no outs. Like, you got to get that guy to third base type of thing." And that was fine. Like I had no problem doing that. I ran well, could steal bases, I could bunt, I could do all the things that like, you know, you would want out of let's say like a National League utility player. But that wasn't the case. It was American League my entire career. And, you know, just it's really funny looking back on it, because the game has changed so much since we played, like even this short amount of time. Since 2015, like it is complete. I mean, well, I guess 2009 when I got drafted, but you know, it used to be baseball. Now it's just like go up there and try to hit home runs. Like everybody, it doesn't matter what position you play, like everyone's swinging for the fences. Isn't
it crazy? It is so weird, because I remember I was so into baseball as a kid. That was like my first love. And, you know, we used to record games on VHS and stuff. I remember watching, you know, in the 90s when the Braves were super good and all this. Anyway, I was a tortured Cubs fan, but I'll barely follow it now. But I'll watch and I'll be like, who is this little tiny guy who, like, they're showing how many home runs he's hit? I'm like, does everybody just hit home runs now? Are there any just like base hitters anymore?
No.
But was that, so I have two questions and maybe they're connected. Was it difficult when you had to hang up baseball? And I know you said you didn't want to do the corporate thing. You wanted to be an entrepreneur. Was it like, great, I feel energized. I'm done with the sports, you know, thing as my career. I'm going into this. This is exciting. Or was it kind of like, what the hell do I do now? And then in those first couple of years of Barpay, was that something you were just bootstrapping on the side, or did you raise money for it? Like, how were you surviving while trying to build this thing? You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. I would say for us, and I don't want to speak for you, I'll speak for myself, but I think it's probably similar. I don't think that we had time to like let it sink in that baseball is over. You know what I mean? Because we legitimately went straight from, I had 7 offers on the table to like keep playing from other teams that wanted to pick up last year my contract with the White Sox. And we had this idea, and we're just like, dude, let's go for it. Like, you know, we've been in AA, like AAA, like kind of dying a slow death here. We're not getting any younger. Let's go do this. We have the grind, we have the grit, we think we can do it. We didn't quite realize what it was going to take to be able to be, you know, persistent and determined enough to actually get something like this off.
I could totally relate, by the way. I've been dying a slow death in church league basketball for the last 15 years. So I'm totally know what you guys are going through there.
Yeah. But yeah, so we you know, put together what our idea of a you know, business model was, and a pitch deck, and we went to some friends and family and said like, hey, like we really think this would be a cool concept, and we think that we can go do it. Now at the time, we didn't have a technical bone about us, right? Like we were athletes coming out. We felt like we could go make the thing happen. And so, yeah, we bootstrapped it / raised a little bit of capital from friends and family. And we weren't paying ourselves. We had, you know, I'd gotten a little bit of a signing bonus from baseball, and had some savings and whatnot. I had done a little bit of work with another company that I'd actually got involved with some family members in the apparel business. And so I was able to save a little bit. So we certainly weren't living a glamorous life as we were starting Barpay. There, you know, we lived on when the devs that we were working with said like, hey, we think that we're sort of at a beta ready phase, and we were ready to start testing. I got a one-way flight to California, and I was thinking maybe I'd be out here for a few weeks, like beta testing. I never actually went back. Like I landed here in the South Bay, like got a taste of surfing, and I just, you know, did the thing. But what was funny about that is when we first got out here, Joe and I we were living on his parents' RV. And so we were just cruising the RV, like, you know, parking at this little place called Dockweiler on the beach. And then we'd drive it to, you know, the local bar where we were testing this app. And that was just a wild, you know, wacky, like crazy time. And then we felt like, you know, okay, this is getting a little bit old. And we had sort of discovered this beach town, Manhattan Beach, and our buddy, or I guess a guy that Joe played baseball with at USC had just moved in. And so we were kind of crashing with him on the weekends, and just like, we had a fun, like 2016 summer where we're starting this company, and just like, you know, had discovered this cool new beach.
Joe just got like a really wry smile when you said 2016 summer.
Yeah, I mean, basically what we were doing was going to a college bar all day and then going to our favorite beach bar here all night, and just being degenerates is one way you could put it. Being entrepreneurs would be another way you could put it, because we were actually getting work done, but we partied a lot that year, and it was awesome.
Yeah, and we just, I don't know, yeah, 16 was definitely interesting. But we had sort of upgraded. Our buddy Ryan was like, man, you guys are over here all the time. Why don't you just like stay? And we're like, all right, we'll upgrade from the RV to the couch. So we started crashing on his couch. We were there for about 7 months. And then I actually ended up meeting my wife towards the tail end of that summer. And
you were like, hey, listen, I'm an unemployed former baseball player sleeping on the couch and trying to build this business. And she was like, sold, I'm in.
She's a beautiful human being. I'll say that. But no, well, won't get into that. But you know, it was an interesting time, and it was, you know, it was a grind time. Like we figured out a way to sort of navigate, operating on very little. And I think that's something that, you know, basically like that minor league lifestyle taught us, right? Like you got to learn how to operate on little to nothing, and like be able to get by. And we were able to do that. We're able to just be like very, very, you know, I would say, it's, what's the word I'm looking for? Not frugal. It's the opposite of frugal.
Opposite. I mean, lean,
judicious.
Lean is the word. Lean is the word that I'm looking for. We were very lean with the money that we had, and so. So when it's fun, it's crazy to think that we survived, like, and Barpay is still a thing and generating revenue. It's pretty wild. So tell me, so Barpay, you said, is still a thing. It still exists. It does. Yes.
Okay. So how did you get that into market, and who are your customers? Give me a quick rundown. I actually had not heard of it before. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Joe, go ahead.
Man, that was, I mean, at the start, like I said, we had that connection to the USC venue. So that was our very first place, which was, you know, a place that gets national recognition every year, is like one of the craziest college bars. That same ownership group opened another place across town at UCLA, which is basically the equivalent, like the craziest UCLA bar. And really from there, you know, it was still just me and Dan. A couple of our buddies would help us out, but all the sales, everything was just like us going to the venues, sitting there and hoping we could like catch the owner. And it was not easy. Like, it was a very difficult industry to kind of break into. A lot of these owners, you know, if you think about it, operations in the bar and restaurant industry haven't really changed for thousands of years. You walk in, you tell them what you want, they give it to you, you pay them, and then like you go sit down. There hasn't really been a whole lot of innovation. So we didn't really understand, you know, I wouldn't say that these owners were opposed to technology, but the best description I ever heard of a bar was like, it's a broken machine that still can generate a profit. So like, you don't touch it at all. You don't change anything about it. You keep the operations the same and all that. So yeah, I mean, we basically went up and down the California coast, pitching college venues, you know, showing them what we had done at the 9-0 and at Rocco's at UCLA. And we had success. Like, we would sign venues when we go and spend time in a certain town. If we stayed there and did the marketing ourselves, you know, just like standing outside as kids are going in, hey, download this app, we'll give you a free drink or something like that. It worked, but we kept seeing the same like problem of once we would leave the town. So like, for example, if we went up to San Luis Obispo and signed a couple bars, stayed there for a weekend, promoted, came back down, you know, 2 weeks later, no one's using it. The staff, you know, forgets how to operate it. They don't do something as simple as like turning on a TV that says, hey, this is where you pick up your Barpay order. And we couldn't afford to, you know, pay marketing people to go there and do these long campaigns. So we you know, survived for a handful of years just off of, you know, that kind of grind of local places that we could drive to if they needed us, or, you know, on the busy nights, show up there and work for, you know, getting people to download the app and whatnot. But it really wasn't something that was scalable at the time. And it's still, you know, a challenge every day. Like, we still run that company on a daily basis. There are some more employees now, but it's still a very difficult industry to break into. And so
it's so interesting. I just went to barpay.com and I was looking up you guys on Crunchbase as well. Very interesting. So you just pop into a bar. You don't even need an app necessarily. You just can like scan
everything sort of changed with COVID. So when COVID happened, you know, everything at this point was really like that 10 p.m. to close crowd. It was the high volume, you know, that's what we were focused on. And then,
mind you, we were like 25 at the time, so we're a little bit more seasoned now.
And so it's, yeah, I mean, so we're like highly focused on that college crowd, and then COVID hits and it's just like completely flatlined. Like, revenue didn't come down, it like went to zero. And at this point, I had basically been wearing the sort of product management hat with that company, also as a founder. And I would get super frustrated in talking to our developers about, you know, just like technical stuff, right? Like having dev talk with these people, just like
why can't you just make it work, guys? Why is that so hard?
Well, and just like understanding different terms that they would say. And I just, you know, my personality type is like, I like to understand why it works, right? Like, and I like to be able to do that. And so I was like, look, if we're going to be involved with like starting a tech company, I should probably like at least know some basics of programming and whatnot. So I started learning how to program, and this actually plays into not only what ended up happening with Barpay, but also Haste as well. And so when everything happened with COVID and all the bars and everything were shut down, we needed to pivot, or else it was like, this is just, it's going to be dead. And so we had one of our venue owners reach out and say like, hey, can you, and this is before any of the QR code digital menus and things that you see at restaurants were a thing. This is like probably February of 2020 or something like that. They said like, we're hearing word that they may do some restrictions or something on like types of menus that we can have. We have to have disposable menus, and like that just seems wasteful. Can you help us digitize our menu? We're like, yeah, that should be easy. We could probably just like put it on a QR code or something. And we did that, and they were just like, we're using it. We're like, well, what if we did that as a service? And then so basically programmed a simple way, and us knowing sort of how these bar owners worked and how they operate and think, it was like, they need something so simple that's just like anyone can do it, right? And so we basically created a service that allowed people to, allowed restaurants, bars, whatever, to just quickly go in and literally within a minute or two have a QR code with their menu loaded up, a PDF version of their menu. And so we just started doing like a very small like Google spend just to see what would happen. And then like we were seeing ROI, and then we increased it a little bit. Next thing you know, we're spending like legitimate dollars every month just on Google ads. At this point we have over 15,000, accounts that have been created. Like we have, millions and millions and millions of scans of people, doing this. And at some point along the way, we were like, well, we've had all these sort of issues with, no one wants to download an app to go and, you go into a bar, like as cool as Barpay is in theory, you get there, you're there to be with your friends, you're there to eat, you're there to have a drink, whatever. We're like, well, we know that it's a pain point. Why don't we just take this idea of, these QR codes and, just make it a web app instead of an app that you have to download. And that sort of changed the game. And like, all of a sudden we went from dying this slow death, like imminently going to die, to like, it got sort of re-energized and now became a thing, and actually is, it generates, I would say, fairly significant revenue. And
Barpay is, it's not built on Bitcoin or anything like that. It's using sort of traditional payment stuff, right?
It is not. That is correct. We've always wanted to implement that. And I think we get closer and closer every day. But it truly is the thing that ultimately led to, it led to Haste, really. Like,
Well, let's get into that. So Barpay kind of revives itself, and there's something there. It's making some money, but you still have this interest in some of the things that Bitcoin can do. When did the idea for Haste come about, and what made you decide to launch it?
We were sitting in the office one night, and
this was January 2nd of 2021. This was like the day after New Year's, and it's like 11 o'clock at night. And go ahead.
Yeah, we were sitting there, and we were just like, man, like, why aren't people getting it? Why aren't people getting this Bitcoin thing? Like, it's just so frustrating. And we just sat there in the office and just kind of like sat there in silence for a little bit. We're just like, what can we do to help? Like, at this point, we were just sort of bystanders. We were doing our thing. We weren't really participating, at least publicly, in like anything that was Bitcoin related. We were passionate about it. We saw the potential in the technology, but we just weren't active participants. And we're like, is there anything that we could do? Like, we have this fairly big network of, bars and things that we've been able to build. Surely we could do something to help. And we just, the question that was coming up in the conversation was, Joe, do you mind going on mute while those people are talking? Sure. It's all good. Was how can we demonstrate a micropayment to the real world in a way that abstracts all of the sort of blockchain, crypto, Bitcoin, the things that are going to make people scratch their head and go like, I'm confused. I don't know what this is. Right. And, Joe mentioned it earlier. We're not gamers. We don't have a gaming background other than like us playing baseball. And we basically just said
the original gamers.
Right. We're just like, well, what if there was some sort of game? Like, what if it was like a game-based thing? Like, everyone likes to game, casually game. And we just started toying with this idea of like, what could you do with a micropayment in a game? And for some reason, like, sort of that old school concept of being in an arcade kept coming to mind. And like, this idea of leaving your name on the leaderboard. And then all of a sudden, as one of us said, I can't remember who it was like, well, like, what if we just paid the leaderboard? Like, and it was like, okay, so you put a quarter in and then it pays the existing leaderboard. We're like, whoa, like that's interesting. Right. And that's basically where it started. We're like, well, I'm not a game developer. Like, you're not a game developer. Like, how can we go prove this? And it's like, well, I was like, I think I could program like a simple game. And so we came up with that game called Haste, which is basically just a dot on the screen that, it appears on the screen randomly somewhere. You see how fast you can tap it. Your score is measured in milliseconds. And yeah,
me and my kids have spent many fractions of pennies on that damn thing. I'm not very fast at it.
Yeah. So it was funny. Like we just kind of, programmed that game as, like I said, it was insecure, junior dev at best, just like, but it was I think the Hand Cash Connect SDK had just came out. I was actually excited. I was playing with the Connect. I was playing with the Connect documentation while I was home for Christmas break. And things were starting to formulate in my head before we even had this conversation of like, what all is possible with this? Like, there's just, my mind was going nuts. And so programmed this game, got like all of the ILP mechanics working. And then we just put out a tweet. It's like introducing, we were like, we're going to call it instant leaderboard payouts, because that's what it is. And, some people picked it up. The next thing you know, like, it's getting retweeted. And, very quickly we went from, basically this idea in our head to like, there were hundreds of people all around the world playing the game. And the next thing you know, it's like there are thousands of people playing, all around the world. And we had some people from the community that we had looked up to and had watched in videos and things reach out and be like, hey, like, we think you're onto something, like, can we help, blah, blah, blah. And the next thing you know, we're getting invited to Zurich, Switzerland to speak on panels about the future of gaming and micropayments. And we're just like, whoa, what's going on? I think ultimately what caused us to realize, like, we knew that there was something to it. But then Unbounded Capital wrote an article called Bitcoin Unlocks the Future of Gaming. And through that article, they described exactly what was in our head and exactly what we were thinking. Yeah, we had never had any conversation with these guys. And we were like, okay, they get it. This could be a thing. And there's a much bigger play here rather than just this simple little game that had been built. So tying, Barpay and Haste are very, like, I would say, integrated, because the very first people that we called when we were like, okay, this could be a thing, was we hit up Eric LaForce, who is now one of the co-founders of Haste, and basically said, like, hey man, like, nighttime project, that we've kind of been into this Bitcoin thing for a while, like we may have something here, like, and we explained it to him, and he was like, yeah guys, that's actually a really good idea. They come from a consulting background. Eric was leading like a team of 200 developers at a consulting firm. And he was like, that's a really good idea. He has a twin brother, Keith. He takes this idea to Keith, and they basically came back and were like, guys, like, this is a really good idea. Like, we really, really like it. We've never seen anything or heard anything like this. I was like, well, here's what we would like to do. Like, do you guys want to be involved? Like, we would like to basically take this concept of ILP, turn it into a platform, and allow third-party game developers to start building and submitting games, and basically adhering to this. What it is really is, it's an incremental source of revenue for a game developer. It's a new way to monetize. And so they were pretty high up over at this company and had some equity and whatnot, and were making really good salaries. And they basically came back and said, like, we're at a place in our life where we feel like we can take a risk. Like, if you'll have us, like, we'd love to join. And we're like, dude, let's go.
Yeah, that's awesome.
They both joined as our technical co-founders, and yeah, we just started sprinting towards putting this platform out. And it's actually really crazy, man. Like, to think in such a short amount of time, like, what's been accomplished. Like, when you go to think that it started with this very simple little dot game, and to now go into the arcade today and just see even, the jump game and the lost game. I don't know if you've seen those yet, but it's just sort of night and day between starting at this little dot game, and now we actually have, like, a 3D game in there, and it's like, it's only going to get better.
Yeah. We'll hopefully in a minute here we can actually walk through briefly those. For those of you listening on audio, we'll try to sort of describe it. I want to just kind of show a quick glance. And we did a little bit on the earlier episode with Alex Agut from Hand Cash. He talked a little bit about Haste, and we did some screen share on that. But it's funny. I can't help but think about your market that you got to know really well with Barpay. I'm like, I could totally see bars having a little arcade game in the corner where you just scan the QR code to log in as a user, and then you play, and it's got the leaderboard, and the bar is taking a small percentage of each of those quarters.
we're basically in a place where there's so many cool things that you can do with this concept that like we need
bowling alleys.
We need a few gears to click. We need a few key like metrics to be like, okay, this is real. Like we know that the concept is real. We have some early indicators that this could be a thing. Now we need to go spend some marketing dollars, which we've just started doing. We need to see some gears click, and we need to start bringing on resources that can go do these things, because ILP in the physical world is really, really fun to think about. I mean, like the
you think about like
the physical,
I mean, like whatever, Top Golf, batting cages, whatever. There's putt, there's a lot of things where you can start to. Well, so this is an interesting strategy question. Is sort of, I guess there's two separate questions, but on sort of a go-to-market strategy or distribution, going right to consumers first and saying, get people to play these games digitally. That's one strategy. The other is more of a channel partnerships model where it's like, can we find people that essentially can utilize this technology? And you guys, it kind of seems like with the platform approach, you're doing a little bit of each. You're kind of marketing, Haste Arcade to consumers directly as a place they can come play games. But then you're saying, look, we're not going to develop all the games. We're going to be a platform for others. What is because like it totally makes sense to me, the platform play, right? It's brilliant. If we've learned anything from the last decade or whatever, it's like do integrations, be a platform, let an ecosystem form around you. I mean, look at Salesforce, right? Look at Slack, look at, let other people develop on top of your thing. But there's also like a challenge of if you haven't demonstrated the killer app or something that makes people like, oh my gosh, this is amazing yourself, right? So like, how did you answer that question of, okay, we made this little game that was a great MVP of this ILP model. Do we need to ourselves build the game that's really, really cool to show what's possible? Or do we immediately go to the platform and hope that game developers are going to come and make the game that makes us popular? You know what I mean? It's like it's like a social network or something that's relying on user generated content. It's like, it's that cold start sort of thing. How do you kickstart it with something really, really good that makes people come? How have you guys thought about that question, just sort of from a strategy standpoint?
I think it's mostly about just trying to show it on a smaller scale, and then you can scale up. Like I think we're seeing we're seeing bits and pieces of it right now with Jump, right? Like the first set of games that are in the arcade, they're all very, very basic, all simple. But like Jump, all of a sudden, like we started to see people saying like, oh, Jump's really addicting to play. Like I find myself killing time just playing this game. It's going to be little things like that. I don't think that, yes, I mean, it can happen overnight. Like a killer game could just happen. We're certainly not expecting that to happen. What we're looking for is small incremental things that are going to happen that, and we can control our own destiny in a sense, in that we do have some game dev talent on our side that can help build these games and stuff. But it's really about creating just a fun place to be, right? So like the first iteration of the arcade is this like ILP concept, right? But that's not where it stops. I'm probably getting a bit ahead of myself because I know we want to cover some of the things that we're going to do. So I'll kind of lay that to the side for now, but it's really about, I think, just demonstrating at a small scale, like, hey, here's a game that took us a week to build or 2 weeks to build, right? And this is the amount of time, this is the amount of resources that we put into it. And this is the return that we got on investment. Okay, what happens if we take a month to build a game? What happens if we take 6 months to build a game? Because there's a very clear correlation between quality of game and engagement, right? Like, the ILP concept has its challenges on a global like leaderboard, because you start running into these things like these power laws, right? So Rainey, anyone that plays in the arcade knows who Rainey is because he's always at the top. Now there's direct correlation between how often he plays and his scores. It's a sort of proof of work. Like he's played more than anyone by a long shot. And therefore his scores are the best. And so he kind of sits at the top of leaderboards. But there becomes this problem where, let's say you have 100 person or 500 person or 1,000 person leaderboard, but you have 1 million people playing. Now it's like, is it is it still fun if I know that I'm never going to get on the leaderboard? Now it just kind of becomes like a lottery. It's like, maybe if I get lucky and I go on a good run and I land on the leaderboard and I'm there for 10 minutes, I make $5,000 or whatever it is, because at that scale, the numbers start getting silly.
Yeah. And there's some interesting like game design things that I can imagine evolving around that. Like certain types of games might have a greater ability to place as a first timer versus others, or you could even play around with time bounded multiple types of leaderboards, like a real-time leaderboard, a daily leaderboard, whatever. There's some different things that I can imagine evolving. I'm curious on the like let's say you went to a studio that makes a bunch of apps already, like whoever makes Clash of Clans and whatever. They usually eventually aggregate into these studios that own or make several, and say, here's this piece of technology you can integrate into your game. Is there a challenge with that approach because this is built on BSV and like that adds complexity to those people? Like, is this something you feel like you can go outside of the network of BSV developers and pitch it to sort of normie developers and they get it and there's a there, or is there like a reason that that's a hurdle that can't get overcome?
I don't think it's a hurdle that can't be overcome. I do think that the drama surrounding BSV it sucks. Like
not even just the drama. I just mean like pragmatically, like, well, my users don't want to have to go obtain BSV. They just want to use Apple Pay.
Well, so that's certainly a point that we have been thinking about for the last couple months. Is we've been so focused on onboarding, because we actually at this point we don't even consider ourselves a crypto company. Like, we're just sort of using it as the, it's the plumbing, really. Like,
yeah, because you can't do hundredth of a penny payments.
Right. I mean, we literally just released yesterday sort of the next iteration of the arcade, which includes Haste credits. And for all intents and purposes, like you can't even see Bitcoin. You can't even see what's going on. I can come into the arcade, sign in with Google, sign in with Twitter, and I can use a credit card, buy some Haste credits, and start playing the games. Now, under the hood, ILP is still occurring, right? Like it's coming out of the Haste wallet instead of, you don't even have to have a hand cash wallet to start playing now. And that's what we've been trying to get to, is like, dude, all the stuff that's happening in the space and whatever, it's like, it's all a fugazi, and we're so close to it that it feels so real. And so like, it just feels like, oh, this is what it is. But dude, the world that's out there, it's so big. There's so many casual gamers that don't care about crypto. And we just think that they'll be into this concept, right? Like, take crypto out of it. And that's ultimately what we've done. We think that we're finally at a place where we feel like it makes sense to start spending some marketing dollars.
Yeah. Nobody cares about the technical specifications of the solution. They care about getting the problem solved, right? I mean, it's just a classic stuff you hear, like, whatever, don't sell a drill bit, sell the hole, right? That people want to drill with it or whatever. So like this idea of, oh, we got to go evangelize people about a protocol. It's like, you don't go to evangelize people about JavaScript. You just build some really cool shit. And if JavaScript is the best tool to build it, you build it. And if people like that thing, they don't care. They don't have to like the tool you use. They don't have to care about it. Can you do something can you find a relevant market that you can solve a problem for that makes them really happy? Or in the case of something like gaming, it's more like delighting them. I mean, I guess you could define it as solving a problem of wanting to be entertained or being bored, but like, can you delight people and give them that experience that says, wow, this is really cool. This is fun. And my test is always with my kids. I'll be like, hey, get on here and play this thing. And if they think it's really cool, it's like, okay, there's something interesting there. If they're like, what is this Bitcoin thing? Why do I have to do this? Right? Then it's like, okay, this is made by someone who loves the solution and is trying to find a way to sell it to someone, versus someone who loves the market and the problem and is just using Bitcoin to do something. So are you guys able to, do you want to do a little screen share and walk through a couple of the things on Haste?
Yeah, I would love to.
All right.
I will, let's see.
I think something you started to hit on there too, when you're talking about, are you guys trying to get game development studios or users? And like, it is a chicken or the egg, but one of the other things we've said kind of from the beginning was, we are personally yet to see a blockchain company, outside of an exchange actually advertising to the non-crypto community. Like if you scroll through Instagram, if you see a crypto ad, it's going to be for FTX or it's going to be for Coinbase. Basically like, hey, this is where you can go speculate on a whole bunch of bullshit. Like that there isn't like an actual product yet that has been marketed to the masses. And that was something too that we were like, hey, and this is what's been so cool about the arcade and getting it to the point where like crypto is in the background. Like you can just market this as a regular product. It's like, hey, if you like a gamer, here's a new way to monetize, something that you're already doing today.
Yeah, I could totally see like a little ad, on Twitter feed or whatever. It's like a GIF that's like, can you do the X 1 cent per play, get paid for making the leaderboard or something, and being like, okay, I've seen it enough times. I think I could play this. Let me get on there. You don't have to do any of that. I love it. Okay, so this is Jump. I actually have not seen this game.
Yeah, so Jump is Jump's the one that I think, it's a good one. I mean, it's not like a complex game, but it's just one of those games that like, oh man, I think I can get a little bit further type of thing. So I'll just go in. We'll play the micro board it's got 85 people on it at the moment. So I mean, this is one of the things about
dude, the number of tabs that you have open is making my left eye start to twitch.
Oh, this is nothing.
You're like, this is my 6th window.
It can get even worse. I don't know if it's going to do it with the sound or not. The sound's definitely good. But we'll just play at this micro level. So it's 10 cents.
Okay.
And this is using a credit play. So what actually just happened was I had basically bought $5 using a credit card. I don't have to have my hand cash wallet connected. And now it's just spending from that credit. But this game is, you get two taps per platform or 2 jumps per platform.
Okay.
If you land on a platform, it resets. And then what'll happen is you'll run into these little stars, and that's going to give you God, I wish the music was playing. It's
like a bonus jump.
It gives you a bonus jump if you need it, right? So like that was 2.
Oh,
actually that was 2. It wasn't 3. So if I ever get to a point, and what ends up happening is it's gradually speeding up.
Oh yeah, okay.
And then so what'll end up happening? So I now have three bonus jumps. I'm in a pretty good spot at this point.
I mean, this is basically like Super Mario Run with shapes instead of characters, He's into
This is pretty fun to be playing like live like this.
Yeah, a lot of pressure.
I feel like I'm back in my baseball days.
When we go back to the arcade, I want to point something out too, specific to Dan, because he is pretty freaking good at this game.
I'm number 1 and I've made more.
Yeah, people probably get suspicious if you're too high up your own leaderboard.
Yeah, but see, all these scores are on the blockchain, so
that's true. No, that is one thing that I think is awesome about gaming apps here. And I know this is a big value prop for crypto fights. I don't really play that kind of game or understand it too well myself, but the fact that all of the actions are on chain, and so there is this, if there are people motivated enough to feel like somebody's getting cheated or this, that, the other thing, like you can go look at all that stuff. I could see a third party spinning up some little thing that's called like the Jump analyzer, and it like analyzes all the transactions that are being produced by this game and visualizes them in an interesting way and shows you, just for one, just out of curiosity, how many hours do people play or how many things do they do, blah, blah, blah. But then just to look at the payouts and all that kind of stuff. That's what's something that's so interesting about a public ledger with this stuff.
Yep.
Dan, the thing I wanted to show though was on that main page for Jump, where it shows the most earned and the most played. If you click on the most earned,
yep,
you look at the leaders there. That's more than $100, which that's not gonna change your life, but that's decent money. And keep in mind, this is with, several hundred active gamers, a couple thousand people in the arcade in total. Going back to what you were saying previously, Isaac, about, is it about getting the gamers or the studios? It's like, when you start seeing people who are making $500, $1,000 in a week or a month, like now you're talking about, hey, I paid half of my rent from spending, fractions of a cent. That's when I think you'll start to see some rapid like user adoption. Like the first person from the mainstream who's like, dude, I don't know, how or why, but I just made $800 in 2 weeks from playing Jump, like this really simple game. Like you got to check it out. And that's when you'll start to see, the credibility and everything really, I think, kind of hockey stick.
Yeah, the fun is, I mean, I love that you can play with such small amounts, and then the payouts are relatively small amounts until the scale gets huge. But you can also play for more. You can play for $1 or $10, and now the payouts start to get a lot bigger as well. Okay, so now you're kind of showing us
this is basically just so most people that know about the arcade just sort of know the gamer side, right? Like they don't know and haven't seen the amount of time that we've been putting into the actual developer experience, right? So what you're looking at now is basically the developer documentation. Like this is an open API, anyone can access it. Anyone can go build a game and submit it to the arcade.
I mean, it's got a beautiful UI. I got to tell you, as a non-technical person, usually when you look at this stuff, it's just like kind of looks like a mess to me. But this is, I mean, I don't know, but it looks like it's super straightforward, super easy to work with. So are you getting developers starting to build games? Like how many games do you have right now that you guys did not build yourself?
Actually, the majority. Yeah, the majority of the games that are in the arcade right now are games that we did not build, which is great. And we started that with what we called like a mini developer competition. We basically just wanted to get our feet wet. No one had used the SDK. No one had sort of put their hands on any of the tools that we had built. And yeah, so we did a little mini competition to just see what would happen. And it was, I think what happened is about what we expected, right? We had 10 to 12 games that were submitted. We got a lot of great feedback, and what we want to do in the future is sort of up the ante a little bit. And I mean, at this point, we've raised some capital, so we're capitalized, and we want to go out and raise the stakes a little bit, go get some whether it's a game studio or taking an existing game that has a following and sort of converting it, because there is one challenge at the moment. We're working on making this easier, but the security aspect of submitting a game, right? Like most game developers are just building client side single player games, and there is a cheating element or a security element that's at stake. And so effectively what you have to do is you have to refactor your game, your single player game, to be more of what you have to adhere to what we call the server authoritative model. And so that just basically means that your game state and game score submission needs to be, handled by the server and not the client, type of thing. And so that can be a bit of a challenge for, I would say, like junior devs or anyone that hasn't done that type of thing before. But we're actively trying to create tools and things that make that easier. Now, if we went to a AAA rated studio and said like, hey, it needs to be server authoritative, they'd be like, cool, got it. We'll see on the other end, type of thing.
Yeah. So it's a little bit of a barrier for the tinkerer or the early. Okay. From a business model standpoint, I get if you're building a game yourself, that it's very straightforward. Let's say the people pay 10 cents to play, you take 2 of those cents or whatever it is, right? And the rest goes to the leaderboard. From Haste's standpoint, are you, anybody who has a game on your platform, are you taking a percentage of those payments? Or are you doing something where if they use your API or your ILP, code, you're taking some kind of like per activity? How does that business model work?
Yeah. So at the moment, it's a percentage of each gameplay. That could change over time. Right now, when you submit a game, you are sort of still responsible for like hosting that game on your own servers, et cetera. What we would like to do and what we ultimately want to get to is sort of a PaaS, sort of platform as a service, where you just submit your game and we host it, we deploy it, we have all the different things around the world that make latency and all that stuff.
Yeah, you could almost have like a tiered, like, hey, you want to host it yourself and all this stuff, we'll take 10% or 5%. If you want us to host it and do all this, we're going to take a little more on up the chain.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's so cool. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's basically it. So right now it's 70%, 30%. The developer keeps, and we keep 30%. That's pretty standard in terms of like models that are out there. We don't know if that's the long-term sort of model, but if you came to us today, that's what it would be.
Yep. Okay. And they get to choose what, that 70-30 split is of the part that they're taking, and they get to choose how much they're taking and how much is getting paid out to players.
So at the moment, there's a pretty standard set of things that I would say are hard coded, meaning it's not just the leaderboard. We also have player cards, which are an NFT that you can mint. And that sort of stems from, Joe and I's background in baseball. And like, we thought it would be cool if people could have a player card. So if you mint your player card, which that is one of the features that should be rolling out in the next couple of days. It's been missing from the beta. It was as a part of the alpha, but it's currently been missing from the beta. It should be out in the next couple of days, hopefully. No pressure, Eric. But yeah, so 10% of every gameplay goes to the player card owner. 10% goes into what's called the Haste loyalty wallet, which is basically a loyalty program that we've set up for our early adopters as a means and mechanism for like sort of recapturing some of the value that you get from spending. That sort of plays into the whole like HST token, and you're ultimately getting an HST token. There's a daily distribution of HST tokens that are happening. I can come back to that, but going back to the payment split, it's leaderboard, platform, developer, player card, and loyalty wallet. Those are
interesting.
All
so the leaderboard, totally get that. I get the other ones. The player card, is that whoever holds the card of the player that just played?
That's correct.
Okay, got it. So
you
I
can
could
hold your own.
I could potentially sell my player card to someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mint it. If you're playing and you have your own card, you just get a 10%. Like you become one of the outputs in the Bitcoin script, right? Like, if for whatever reason, like you've built up some cool stats and people like you as a player, it's like, oh, I want that card. You could go buy that card and make them an offer or whatever. And now that I hold it, if I hold your card when you play, I earn that 10%.
Yeah. So you want to hold, what was that guy's name? Rainey or whatever? Yeah. You want to hold Rainey's card there. I mean, I love there's so many things you can do. Like you mentioned, rewards tokens. Because of the ability to attach payments and data, to be able to split payments in all these ways, to be able to issue tokens on top of this, that's all done on chain. So there's just so many really cool layers and permutations that you can see here. That like, and again, that's what's great about making it a platform. You can kind of create the guardrails, and then you can kind of see, what do people start inventing, and what do they start coming to you asking for? Hey, we want to do this thing where we do this, and then this other thing is, can you make that possible? Okay, you mentioned when we got started that the ILP, instant leaderboard payout, that's just the start, but the vision is so much bigger. And then you sort of gave us a teaser and said you'd get to that. What's the big vision? Give me the big long-term pitch of what you're trying to build here at Haste, and what's that future look like?
Joe, go ahead. And if you miss anything, I'll add my 2 cents.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, which one? I mean, it feels like there's like 4 or 5 like big term visions. Also, it is kind of loud in here.
You're fine.
But I think in terms of, at least with the arcade, right, where we want to take ILP specifically, and this is just one of the 3 or 4 other major things we want to do. But the AAA studios, like Dan talked about, you go and play Call of Duty or something like that. And now there's not just like, the overall score leaderboard, but there could be like a headshots leaderboard within the game. There could be, consecutive games played where your kill to death ratio is a certain amount, or you could do it in a sports game. There's just
like, how much ammo you have left over after each round or whatever. Yeah.
Because of the micropayment, you can assign it to any of these things. Like, that's what's so cool about micropayments. It creates all these new, potential business models or revenue streams that I don't think these game studios realize yet. But anyways, so for ILP, working with, you know, the AAA studios, getting it in major games that are played by 10 million people, but then also taking ILP into the physical world. So the example that we talk about a lot is like a Peloton, for example. You go on your Peloton, you're logged in, you're watching your instructor. There's 2,000 other people at the same time logged into their Pelotons on the same course as you. If you want to, you know, you can spend a penny or a dollar or whatever saying, I'm going to have a really good ride. I think my time on this particular course is going to, you know, beat whoever else is doing it at the same time.
I could see something that almost combines, there's an app called Hona, which is sort of like a personal accountability app. Where like you're a Peloton and you're like, okay, I'm going to do 20 minutes every day for the next 30 days. I'm committing to that, and I'm going to stake $50.
Yep.
And if I don't hit it, that gets paid out to the top people who showed up every day.
Who did it or whatever.
You know?
Yep.
Yeah.
That'd be a cool little partnership with Hana, actually. Yeah. But yeah, so you have that aspect of it. You have, you know, the loyalty side of ILP as well. So not necessarily like a micro payment in BSV, but think about going to a grocery store or, you know, staying at a hotel, one of these types of businesses that has huge loyalty programs. You know, every time you're going there to, let's just say your local grocery store, you're swiping your card, you're paying X amount of money. Well, if you want to join their loyalty program, because of the micro payments, because, you know, what is it really that big of a deal for a grocery store who's bringing in, you know, millions of dollars of revenue to subsidize 1 or 2 pennies per, you know, credit card swipe to pay out in terms of loyalty tokens? I think, you know, there's a lot of things that you can do with that type of technology. Like I was in Las Vegas last week, same type of deal with the casino. You know, I'm not going to be spending actual BSV when I'm playing blackjack, price is fluctuating. But for the actions that I'm taking in that casino, and it doesn't even have to be gambling now. It's like, oh, I went to, you know, the restaurant and I got casino tokens. I went to the pool and I got casino tokens. And they already have their player card type of things, right? Like they have, if you spend your money at this particular hotel, you get these benefits. But you start thinking about tokens on an exchange, what you're going to see is like, well, yeah, maybe the MGM Grand is where I'm staying, but the tokens that I really want are to the Wynn because their pool party is really cool and I can redeem Wynn tokens. So now I can actually exchange those just because of like tokenomics and whatnot. And so I think that's just another, like for ILP, right? Like it doesn't have to be currency that you're dispensing. It could be tokens. It could be basically anything. You don't have to attach a value to it, but you can start plugging it in to these other, you know, verticals. So I think
it's so amazing, like a marketplace for rewards points, where I can be like, okay, you know, I'm moving to a city that doesn't have whatever, Dave and Buster's or a gas station that I go to, and I got all these points. I'm going to go on this exchange. And I'm going to trade them for some other kind of thing or whatever. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, there's so many things that kind of layer on top that, again, because of the ability to make these instant, really small payments and the properties of Bitcoin, you can just start to get. And I mean that's the biggest challenge as an entrepreneur. Like, the way to be successful as an entrepreneur is to say no to a lot of really cool ideas so that you can win on the 1 or 2. So how do you guys deal with having so many possibilities and deciding which ones to focus on now?
We battle that like every day. And that'll kind of tie into, and I'll let Dan take the next one, but it's like, you know, the end goal for ILP is, like I've kind of mentioned, but then we've talked about too, what about a physical Haste console? What about a console that's actually powered, you know, by the blockchain and enabling all these other things? So like, in terms of that bigger picture, you have that. But then for other ideas, you have what I'll let Dan dig into, but we're calling it Haste Labs. And there already are some projects out there. So, I mean, Dan, you want to hit on that?
Yeah, I think to answer your question, it's having a team of people, which we have at this point, that we can come together, have strategy calls, and make collective decisions around these things, right? Because I don't think that the ideas aren't going to stop, right? You know, we could exit one day and it's not like magically the ideas are going to stop. No, the ideas are always going to be there. So it's about, you know, journaling these things, writing them down, and talking about them, and basically saying, okay, here's a list of things that we have that we could do. What things should we do, right? So it's, I think if it was just me left to my own devices or Joe left his own devices, like it's very, very scattered because it's like, it's just constantly like coming at us, like just things that you can do. Right. And so we have an amazing like team of people that's working on this project. Eric and Keith, they bring so much experience, not only from like a technical side, but also just from like a business side. Right. The company they were with was a large exit. Like I said, they were up at the top. So they're not just technical guys. They have a lot of business acumen, and they're good to, throw all ideas off, and, they can reason with us and all those things. So I think the answer to the question is like just relying on each other to make the decisions on what would be important to move forward with. But it is difficult. Like it's a challenge, like Joe said, every single day.
Okay. You just said Haste Labs. I have an idea what this might be. And if it's so, I think it's really brilliant. But what is Haste Labs?
So Haste Labs is where we throw noodles at the wall and see what sticks. It is, it's basically a way for, it's a way for us to take these ideas and be like, hey, let's go spend very, very little money, very, very little resource on an MVP, which in a lot of ways is what we did with Haste, right? Like, and let's go see if it.
So these are internal experiments that you're running.
So they're internal until they're not. So like it's like, this is a cool idea. Let's just tease it. Let's go put it out there. So like one example of that is Take It. So Take It NFT. That is a project of Haste Labs, right? It's not a scalable solution. It's not like meant to be anything crazy. It was just a very, very simple concept of, could we gamify the experience of buying an NFT for the end users? And it's like, hey, like, I don't think it would take that long to build this concept. Like, let's go put it out and see what happens. And we happened to put it out, and, a decent number of people like responded to it in a very positive light. And so that sort of gives us the go ahead to be like, hey, like maybe we should spend a little more time here and sort of take this thing to the next level. So Haste Labs will be an incubator for these ideas. I think in a longer term picture, I would love to see it become like a thing in and of itself, meaning it's not just like internal, but it's like we can help take any idea that anyone has for micropayments or whatever, and help incubate those ideas and give the resources to get it off the ground. That
was immediately what I thought when you say Haste Labs. I'm thinking you have you can set up a fund and be an accelerator or incubator. I'm thinking you got people coming on your platform, building stuff on there, and your ability to identify early, hey, this looks like a really legit game. Okay, we have a standard $50K seed investment, and you come do our accelerator program for a month or 3 months, and we give you a little bit of support and try to help you learn how to go raise your first round of funding, put together your thing, work on your thing. Like, I feel like you're positioned really nicely by being the platform for them to build on, to be able to identify who are the winners, who are somebody that's tinkering on a game and they don't maybe necessarily realize how much potential it has, or they don't know how to go and take that and turn it into a business. Again, that's the problem. There's a lot of opportunities, and you got to be
stay
really focused at each step.
Yep.
But that's kind of something that Bitcoin enables also. And I'm gonna Jack Lou, love him or hate him if you're in the community, he's been great to us and really helpful along the way. But he constantly harps, Bitcoin is very fast. It should be very easy. Like it doesn't always need these long, like drawn out business models and plans. Like you should be able to come up with an idea, just like how Haste or how Take It started. And 2 weeks later, like you have it in the market and it's actually having like traction and success. And I think Haste Labs, that is kind of the focus. It's like, we could talk about, okay, let's build out, a full Haste console and all that. That's not a Haste Labs project. That's like an actual, we need to go get Series A funding.
Yeah.
Haste Labs is like, man, what cool things can you do? Can the like Dan is a junior developer. What could he build and launch in 2 weeks? And
it's like a perpetual hackathon.
Exactly, but that's what Bitcoin enables. That's what Bitcoin enables, to actually like monetize these very small hackathons. It's incredible.
Yeah, that immediate market validation is really, really cool. Is really fun, and there's something cool about being in a, obviously there are downsides when it comes to overcoming, what they say, crossing the canyon, and startups coming away beyond the early adopter, true believer market into the mainstream market when you're working with a really small niche, like in this case, BSV people. But there's some huge advantages for really early validation. You immediately, you go throw up a tonic POW campaign for $50. You go do a genuine retweets for $20, and instantly you have a small group of rabid testers who all know about it right away, and they'll all get on there and play around with it and poke holes in it. And you can get some really rapid validation and iteration in those super early stages that I think is like an underappreciated aspect of building on this stuff. Okay, before we go, one thing that we did not get into, I'm curious, you got into Bitcoin in 2015 and you liked the small cheap payments. 2017, you saw the ICO stuff. When, you built this on BSV, how and why did that decision come about? Because that's one of those like, okay, well, why not Ethereum or Solana or Bitcoin Cash? I know why you didn't build it on BTC, because you can't. I also know actually on Ethereum you can't, but there's second layers. Why not the Lightning Network? How did you guys make that technical decision? You don't strike me as religiously devoted to a protocol. You strike me as trying to build some cool shit. So what made you decide to build it on BSV?
Well, I mean, we had followed everything that was happening with BTC, the forks and everything else. Like we tended to gravitate towards Bitcoin Cash when before BSV was a thing. And I think that's sort of a lot of people's journey, right? Like we sort of followed that big block mindset because it just made the most sense, right?
It just makes sense.
It just makes sense. Like it's crazy. Like hearing other people talk, and it's like, had a conversation with actually I'm gonna name who it was, but it's a high up company in the crypto space that everyone would know. And it's like they're demoing their thing, and it's just like, dude, this is so complicated. Like this works for the crypto crowd 100%, but like good luck if you're gonna try and take this to mom and pop and grandma and anyone else that's out in the real world. And it just, I don't know. I mean, I think at the end of the day, like we felt like finally it could be done, like on something like BSV, but we didn't make the decision just like out of the gate, like, hey, let's do this. I mean, part of it was the, like me playing around with the Handcash SDK, like that definitely changed the mindset a lot. Is like, okay, these things are possible, and I can see it because I didn't have the technical knowledge to like go build a Bitcoin script and all that, right? Yep. So it's like, okay, this is JavaScript, this is Node.js, like I can mess with this. So once we had the idea and was like, okay, we're gonna build the platform. We're talking to Eric and Keith. It's like I started going around Discord channels and asking Solana developers and stuff. It's like, here are the requirements. Can we do this? How many transactions can we squeeze into a, how many outputs type of thing or recipients can we squeeze into a single payment? Questions like this. And it just like, Solana, for example, you mentioned BTC, Ethereum, completely out of the question. Gas fees, it's not even, you can't even give it thought. Solana ticked most of the boxes. It was like, okay, at the moment, gaming's massive, right? So like from a scale perspective, it's like, okay, like 50,000 transactions per second, like that sort of ticks the box. From a fee perspective, it ticked the box. Like the fees are low enough on Solana, at least right now, that it would technically work. But then when we started getting into the weeds with like what is actually technically happening with one of these ILP payments, it just fell apart. Like not only from like the technical perspective, like there are probably people that are listening are like, oh, balk at that and say like, you could definitely do this on Solana. You could, but the technical way in which you would need to accomplish it is like queuing up the transactions. And then my pushback would be like, what does that actually create on the support side when you try to pay out 500 people and 5 to 15 of them fail? Because in that account-based model, you need to run through and process the transactions like this, right? Versus with the UTXO model, it's like input, a million outputs. What are like not a million, but
I know the UTXO model. A lot of people give it shit for like, oh, it's not very efficient, blah blah blah. But the number of things you can do with it simply without building a whole bunch of additional tooling is just like, to me, magical.
Exactly. And so we had the decision. We either can do what seems to be working, and like looks like, based on what we're seeing, like it looks like it's scaling. And we just tried to be objective and not use like get involved in all the stuff. I mean, it's like what you said, it's just like it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Like there's really no other two ways about it. It's like, I will say this though, I would say we're chain agnostic, at least from a platform perspective. We want to build things that people are going to use and want to have fun using. So like for some of these other features that we're excited about like rolling out, like tournament mode. So like tournament mode, if you ever played like online poker or anything like this, you kind of have that poker room where you go in, you can sit down at like a sit and go, or you can have like a free roll tournament or whatever. We've just started toying with the concept. We just ran our first sort of guaranteed prize pool tournament the other day. It's all manual. It's not like the actual built out platform. That's all in the works, but it's this concept of going and sitting down at a table with 10 other players, and you're going to play jump for 3 rounds, and you stake $10, and there's a prize pool, and whoever has the highest aggregated score at the end of the tournament takes home the pot. Like those types of things, like sure, Solana works well for, Ethereum will work well for. I hope that when we roll these things out, that like with the $80 gas fees or $40 gas fees or whatever they are at the time, that like the stakes have to be high enough in order to even spend, or else it's like I'm never going to go stake $20 and pay $40 in gas, but I might go stake $2,000. I hope people are playing these games for $2,000 when we introduce Ethereum and some of these things, but it's ILP. It's just not possible. So I for people that are listening, like we do plan to add other chains to things that you can do in the arcade, but if it's ILP related, like it has to be Bitcoin in its original form.
Well, I'd say too, even in that tournament mode, that you described, like there isn't a single thing that we've at least concepted out that BSV can't do. So BSV will be an option for all of these future concepts. It's just like, what other chains would this be possible on, so we can get more people into the ecosystem? And then kind of like us, like if you're around this stuff, eventually it just seems like all roads kind of point down the same direction, which you end up at BSV if you're actually worried about utility and what you can apply this to. And if you keep seeing the same, blockchain on tournament mode, on Take It, on ILP, it's like, dang, what is this? Like, why is this one possible on all these different products that are being put out, yet I can only use my Ethereum, for super high transactions in tournament mode? It just seems like people will naturally, and maybe this is the problem that we've had in BSV, is just thinking that people will think and, come to this conclusion on their own. But, with enough time, and Dan touched on this earlier, we are still super early. Like this is still, the masses they don't care yet. So I think that as we bring more and more people into the ecosystem, they'll just naturally start gravitating towards what they can use across a whole bunch of different products that they enjoy.
Yeah. I mean, and that's, kind of this series is all about, because I think the same way. Like, I don't care which protocol is used for what. I just want it to work, and I want it to be able to do amazing things. And so people will be like, well, why BSV? Well, what about this? And I'm like, I am talking to anybody that's doing anything right now today that's active, that actually works. And like you said, that immediate spin it up, put it out in the market in a week, right? And then you can see how it works and all that stuff. Anywhere that's possible, any protocol is doing it, I don't care. And like, if you're built, you're built on what works today. If something works better tomorrow and it makes you be able to bring this to more people tomorrow, great. Like let the protocol developers keep trying to compete and make things better and see what works. But I just think it's absurd to try to build something on a protocol that requires problems to be solved that haven't yet been solved, and to just bank on some smart developers fixing it in the future and be like, well, our company, our business model will work if they solve this with the next update, and it's unclear whether they will. It's like,
no, that's
It's a great way to put it.
No, it's such a good point. It's like the guy we were talking to the other day. There was a very important feature that Handcash has, which is, I'll just explicitly state, it's the spendable balance feature. That's a very important thing. Like the UX problems that emerge from needing to sign every transaction, like when you're trying to think through building the product, like you need to be able to, and it works for some things, right? Like DeFi, like if you're buying an NFT, like I can see it. But if you need to do multiple things, or you want to have the experience of just like gaming and pressing restart and playing again, it's like, I don't want to have to press the button every time, right? So I was talking about, that's a very important feature that we need in the arcade if we want the experience to be good enough to go to a mainstream user. It's like, okay, well, when is this going to be like done? Because they're talking about rolling this feature out. And it's a very, very popular wallet. If you've ever used Ethereum, you probably use this wallet. I'm not going to state it because I don't know who will end up watching the video, and I don't want to.
Everyone,
anyway,
everyone watches these videos, Dan.
I love it. It's like, when is this going to be rolled out? And it's like, we're shooting for Q3, Q4, and it's like, well, we're building our product now. Like, we don't have till Q3, Q4. Like, it needs to work now. And we all know in technology, like Q3, Q4 really means Q2 of next year, right? Like
18 months.
Right. So
yeah, and I think there's definitely because people will say, well, look, sure, BSV might work today for some of this stuff, but it still can't handle whatever 1 million transactions per second. Whether or not that's true, I'm like, well, yeah, maybe, but I would rather use something that just works now. I can get it working. And then if we get to a point where it stops working, okay, let's see what's going to happen as we're approaching that point. Where is it going to go? And just constantly monitoring everything else rather than say, well, let's build it on something that doesn't work today and then just hope that it starts working.
Right.
You got to get it your hands. You got to get out there in the market.
It makes no sense. Like we can take this project, right? And if we need to pivot, we can pivot.
Yeah.
Right. But like, we can't go build what we're building on Ethereum. And it's like, oh, but layer 2. Okay, well, when layer 2 gets here, maybe we will consider it.
Yeah.
Right. The end of story. It's just like, again, it's amazing the things that I find just completely rational and just like to the point that it's just so hard for people to just. I mean, what is that? What is that with people? Like,
that's what led Haste to become a thing. It's like, how do you just show people, like, look,
yes,
you can just do this
it.
now.
I mean, that's it. It's like, shut up and show me. Like, and I think that's really the magic. And I love what we're seeing unfold, that Hand Cash is kind of in that spot of a really great user friendly, jump on and get a wallet. You can even top it up now with a credit card and then access a bunch of apps. And I love Haste is kind of this other layer that's like, now, as a game developer, you can host all your games here. As game players, you can come on here and play games with a Hand Cash wallet, or even, as you said, with Haste credits. And you're kind of seeing that stack get built and sort of expand the number of people who can just have that experience. And that's the thing. Like, and that was the experience that got all of us into Bitcoin originally. It's like, hey, let me send you some Bitcoin. Boom, it's instant. Oh my gosh, you just sent me a couple pennies. Incredible. What is this? Let me see, right? And like, creating that experience. And that's what's cool. I always see people sharing like these tweets. You guys get all this great free marketing where they're showing their wallet and they're showing themselves getting all these tiny sub-cent payments for being on the leaderboard. And like, it's just there's a magic to it. So, hey, well, really excited for what you guys are doing. I think it's absolutely one of the best ways for normal people to experience the power of micropayments. It's incredible what you've accomplished in just a little over a year. So excited for what's next. Where is the best place for people to go follow you and check out what's up?
I would say right now, Haste Arcade on most of the social platforms. You can go to hastearcade.com or just straight to app.hastearcade.com if you just want to get in and get going. Onboarding experience is definitely tailored towards that mainstream user. So if you're listening and you're not a crypto user, you've never heard of crypto, never had a wallet, this would be a great place to start, get your feet wet. It'll feel just like any other platform you've ever signed up for.
Love it. I think this is a home run, guys. Yeah, you see that? The baseball
I see that.
there?
I see that.
Hey, thanks for chatting, guys. Look forward to staying in touch.
Thanks for having us, Isaac. Appreciate it.